Rick Parker, thanks very much for talking to us about the Civil War in the region of Northwest Arkansas, and we're speaking in the city of Siloam Springs, Arkansas, right in the northwestern corner of the state. And we're thinking primarily about a 30-mile radius with Siloam Springs in the middle, a 30-mile radius going around, which will bring us into a bit of Kansas, Oklahoma, Missouri, and of course Arkansas. And today we're talking about the Civil War in this region, which I know actually is a much bigger topic than most people know. I think you probably know that more than just about anyone else. I mean, how much there is in this area. But just to get started, how generally would you describe the Civil War in this region? So, you know, in a simple statement, the entire war, how would you characterize the war in this region, northwest Arkansas, and going about 30 miles in any direction?
Big question. Probably one word comes to mind: unknown. I think it's ill-defined. I think the area was volatile. It was a lot of dynamic forces involved, a lot of politics, religion, cultures. There were a lot of things that were kind of coming to a head. This didn't just start overnight. It wasn't the firing on Fort Sumter.
Right.
It wasn't slavery. It was probably 100 different things, depending on the cultures that came from Europe that clashed here. There was a big Protestant/Catholicism issue.
Here in this region?
Yes.
So you have Catholic immigrants, you have Protestant immigrants. What are some of the other, you used the word, one of the words you used was volatile, and then you said cultures, and I'm imagining some of that volatility is related to different cultures in this region.
If you think what was going on in Europe, you know, why so many people were leaving Europe to come to the United States. Freedom, you know, that all-encompassing.
Sure.
Things like that. They came here, they got here, and they realized that in a lot of cases it was a different location, but it wasn't that different than what they were experiencing. They had opportunities here that they certainly didn't have in Europe, but they also had the same problems. You know, for those that the Protestants that thought they were getting out of Catholic France, for example, no, they had the same problems here.
There's still, so you have Catholic populations, you have Protestant populations. What else would we put to the cultural mix? For example, I read one memoir of a person who was in this region in the Civil War, and he consistently referred to Union forces as lop-eared Dutch or something like that.
Another word for Germans.
Germans, right. So we have, what else do we have in the cultural mix in this area?
Well, you've got the Indian relocation for one. You know, we're barely 20 years away from that event. And even in 2022 now, if you go to Tahlequah and get into a conversation enough, that is still a volatile issue today. Back then it was an extremely volatile issue. That was not resolved.
Right, so you're referring to the Cherokee, the Chickasaw, the Choctaw, the Seminole
Creeks, yep,
who came from the southeast and were removed from the southeast to present-day Oklahoma, and they come right through this neighborhood. And you and I are speaking that we could walk to the border of Oklahoma in about 5 minutes from where we're sitting right now. So you have different native groups in this area, you have different immigrant groups in this area. And so you're saying before the Civil War even begins that there is a kind of instability and volatility in this region already.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
It was a lawless area. You pretty much controlled your destiny one way or the other. There was no protection. We didn't have courts. We didn't have the social structure that we had. In 1830, Bentonville, for example, the capital in this area had maybe less than 100 population.
Wow.
Even by the time the war started, I think they were still less than 1,000.
Wow.
So this was not a real heavily populated. The Sagers that moved cabin just down the hill, one of their residences, they came from Germany. And it was interesting how they moved into the southern angle, which in northwest Arkansas, that was not really that relevant up here, but the lifestyle, they moved in and did phenomenally well after some stays in Kansas City, St. Louis, before they actually ended up here. They were instrumental in various industries, cabinet making. The younger brother was a phenomenal cabinet maker. His work has never been explored, and yet it's very identifiable, very clearly an artisan.
And what years are we talking about now?
Just pre-war, maybe the 10 years before the war.
So to connect what you were just saying to, kind of what we were saying earlier, then we have the Sagers who are here, and, if you're in the Siloam Springs area, you're going to hear that name because we have Sager Creek and other things with Sager attached to it. But you're saying that at this time, if the Sagers are looking for things that, we would associate with that, word civilization in its traditional sense, there's really not much of that around here. If it comes to defense against criminals, they're on their own pretty much.
Yeah.
If it comes to trade, there's no infrastructure of trade, right, other than what people create on their own?
Well, that's what's interesting. The Sagers, again, I think we're talking about a different breed here. Mm-hmm. They are certainly that upper percentile.
Yeah.
The senior Sager that lived here did a lot of lumbering, a lot of construction. The youngest Sager that lived over around Prairie Creek, which is close to Rogers now. Actually, it's underwater at Beaver Lake, his location. The cabinet maker lived there. The third brother lived in Westport in Kansas City. And between the three of them, they had one procured the raw materials, another made furniture, household things, all that. Then it was sold in Westport. And they had quite a business going.
So they kind of created their own trade infrastructure then.
For example, the Cherokee, and this kind of transcends that intrastate thing going on.
Yeah.
The Cherokee built a very colonial style columned building they called it the girls' seminary, and then they had another one for the boys.
And where was this?
Tahlequah.
Okay.
Well, the Sagers provided the building material, and did quite a bit of the construction over there for the Cherokee. The funny part about a lot of the culture that was going on here, the state of Arkansas was petitioned and actually passed legislation to the old military road, which is essentially Highway 43 now, that ran from Minnesota to the Red River. That was built primarily for the Trail of Tears and the movement of troops to protect those of us on the Arkansas line from those savages just across the line.
On the other side of the line.
As it turns out, it was the savages that, for the most part, had a much higher degree of education. Quite a few Ivy Leaguers came here. The Cane Hill College was attended by a lot of Cherokee.
I was going to ask, are we thinking primarily of the Cherokee?
Yeah. But that also includes the Creeks and some of the other tribes, but more so the Cherokee. It was the Sagers, again, that built the Ridge House that still stands in Fayetteville and furnished it for the Ridges.
So that's interesting. So this is one of these families, and you meet them in different communities. I'm thinking of other communities I've studied myself, and you realize that there's a particular family. I'm thinking actually of the community of Nome, Alaska, where there was a particular family. When you go back and look at the history, you realize that this family, for whatever reason, there was a dynamic at work in this family that just had a lot to do with building the infrastructure of the town. And it sounds like the Sagers,
No question.
That's what was happening here.
No question.
So very interesting.
And Simon's Clear murder was a result of animosity over the relocation. During the war, the boys were pretty much very southern. They've joined, and we'll have to get into it, but they joined the local guerrilla faction, the Buck Brown, and they were actually called Razorbacks, which is interesting.
So the Sager
Boys,
children,
yes.
the Sager boys were, we'll just say anti-union. Then they were guerrilla fighters, anti-union, or how would you characterize them?
When we get a little later into the war, a real, true, traditional insurgency developed here. Really had nothing to do with Confederacy, Union. They weren't happy with either one. Both sides would slit their throats. Both sides would do whatever was necessary, rob, steal, rape, pillage. It just didn't matter. They were more concerned with keeping stability and protecting their family and providing some bit of security here.
Okay.
But back to Simon.
Yeah.
You know where the golf course is here in Siloam, out by the new high school?
Yeah.
Hole number 7 is essentially, give or take a little, there's never been any archaeological work, and it's been probably demolished by now if there was any left.
Yeah.
But that's where the house was, basically. And men just simply during the war years were at a risk of being seen in broad daylight. Women did most of the work, were reasonably sheltered until they weren't, and then it got really ugly. But Simon got caught at home one day, and he was caught by a group of Penn Indians, which is the northern, former southern, departed the south, joined the north, and all of this was from this area. These were people that knew every trail, every water hole, every family, how many kids you had, where you worked, everything about you. And they caught Simon at home. And nobody knows for 100% certain, but they got him outside. He was marched. Zeke Proctor was the leader of this particular group, and he comes into play considerably on a national level later after the war.
Yeah.
But here he was still prominent. And they got him, moved him down the road, had a conversation with him, told him that he had to come with them. Simon Sager mentioned something about he had to go back and get his coat or hat. Descriptions vary. But he was allowed to turn around and start back toward the house, at which point in time one of the guys hit him in the back of the head right in front of his wife, daughter, with a buck and ball around, blew out his hole.
Good grief.
And right there in the yard, and then wouldn't let them come to him. They just had to watch all of this. And there are, again, rumors about what they got, what they didn't get, what happened. You can flip a coin.
So let me see if I have this correct then. So you have natives who had been on the southern side.
Mm-hmm.
Now
at Pea Ridge. At Pea Ridge.
Now they're on the northern side. And he has been identified as someone whose sons are still
Guerrillas on the south.
classified as guerrillas on the south. And that's why they took him out?
Well, that's half of it.
Yeah.
You have the north-south war that's going on, but you also have the factional fighting in the Cherokee Nation between the Rosses and the Ridges, the pro-treaty, the anti-treaty parties. It was as much one as it was the other. And then you throw in the fact that the Sagers were German, and that was also a contributing factor.
Why is that? Why would that be a problem?
Well, there were the German population in Missouri in particular, clearly fanatically northern.
Oh.
And
yeah.
here we're in a Confederate, predominantly Confederate area. And the Germans were just, if you're a German, you're one of those guys.
Right.
The Sagers clearly weren't. And there was a real problem with misidentification of what they were, who they were, and kind of depending, I think there was probably some jealousy. They were quite successful. They were very successful.
So it sounds like, I mean, what you're describing then is that volatility, because it sounds like whether he's identified as being with the North or with the South, somebody's going to get him either way.
And that was
Because it's a
true
very volatile area
across the board here.
in this area.
If I had a horse that you wanted, that you liked, thought it was a really good horse, and yours was an old nag,
Yeah,
well, I just, go steal it.
yeah.
But if you wanted it back, that was horse stealing. That went on over and over and over. And if I found some reason that I wanted to kill you, I would get a law passed where it was okay because your glasses were different.
Identified
You're
somehow.
wearing a
yeah.
short sleeve shirt, well, obviously you're of one side or the other, so
Yeah.
therefore it's okay to,
Yeah, in that context, it's easy to come up with rationales
Yeah.
for why this person needs to be dealt with.
for example, a lot of houses in this area, families that lived here,
Yeah,
were trying to subsist. A group of, say, 30, and I'm kind of paraphrasing here, but a group of
Yeah.
30 or 40 armed men shows up at night, clearly volatile. What are we having for dinner tonight?
oh, just shut
The
it
kids,
up and-
take care of the horses.
Yeah, yeah.
Where are we going to sleep tonight?
Sure.
And this happens. Next morning, these guys, if they're lucky, your house is still intact, nobody's dead, they ride off and go around the corner. Well, from around the other corner comes the other side. You harbored the enemy
No, it's
last
classic,
night.
it's classic. I mean, I'm even thinking of Vietnam, these
Yeah,
villagers
yeah.
who get stuck in the middle.
You have nowhere to
Yeah.
go.